Well, good morning and welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder, and this is BRN AM for Wednesday, November 4th, 2020. And here are our top stories: the impact of small 401k cashouts on retirement income, and examining a whole new set of autos for retirement plans. Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Spencer Williams. He's the founder, president, and CEO of Retirement Clearinghouse, and Rob Austin, Vice President and Head of Retirement Research for Alight Solutions. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Thanks for having us.
Jeff.
It's a pleasure talking with you, and this is a really important topic. Today we're going to talk about small account balances, leakage, and auto portability. But Spencer, I want to start with you first. Let's talk about small balances and cash outs. What can you tell us? Because this is a really big topic within the industry. I want to get your perspective on this.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff, and thanks for having us. So three giant forces have come together in the last decade or so in the retirement industry to essentially generate and frankly continually regenerate what we call the small cash out and the small account problem. The first of those is the mobile workforce. So we have a highly mobile workforce, and it's getting more mobile. Just think gig economy, and you get the drift. But in fact, if you look back 50 years, you can find Department of Labor information that shows turnover rates in the 10, 15, 20%, fairly constant, good times and bad. So that's number one, a mobile workforce. Number two is we have this phenomenon called automatic cash outs. Now, this is more a regulatory event, legislative event, which says, and it was put in place for the benefit of plan sponsors, which is when your small account or your participants with small accounts terminate their employment, you can automatically kick them out of the plan. You can distribute them, okay? And a certain segment of those, people with less than $1,000, not only can you kick them out of the plan, you can just send them a check, okay? Yep. And so this is a huge contributor to the cash out problem. And the third big vector, if you will, the third big force, is what we like to refer to as systemic friction, right? Now, on a normal day, most people, frankly, if they were said, would you like to keep your money saved or spend it, they would say they'd like to keep it saved, except there's a gotcha here. And the gotcha is that it's really hard. So you say, I want to keep my money saved. I'm going to get kicked out of my old plan. Let me put it somewhere safe, like my new plan. And that's where the rub comes in. It's extremely difficult to move your money from one plan to the next. So friction, the mobile workforce, and then the automatic cash out provisions have come together to create, two really big problems. The biggest one is people cashing out early. And the second one is the system is littered with small accounts.
Yeah, thanks for that, Spencer. And Rob, I want to come to you because Alight Solutions has released a report recently, done a lot of research on participant behavior, and exactly what Spencer is talking about. These small account balances being pushed out, you have a lot what's called plan leakage. We're going to get into that in a couple minutes. But what does the Alight research really show?
Yeah, so thanks, Jeff, for having us here. So when we look at people and what they do with their account balances when they terminate employment with their employer, we find that it's actually, overall, it's about 40% of people end up cashing out their balances. But when I focus in on that small account, what Spencer was talking about with people that have less than $1,000 in their account, that amount actually doubles. It's 80% of people take their money with them and cash it out. They don't roll it over. They don't keep it in the plan. They cash it out. And those people are incurring 10% penalties. They're getting less money, and it's not saved in the system for the retirement anymore.
And Rob, is this a function of maybe, we're going to talk about auto portability, the aspect of that momentarily, but is this also a function of a lack of education or literacy, people forgetting about their account balances, not doing anything, not knowing what to do, even though they get that nice 402F notice, that special tax notice with their distribution package, or electronically now probably?
Yeah, so it's really difficult to know exactly why people are making the decisions that they're doing. What we just see is like exactly what's happening. I think some of it is exactly what Spencer said, where there's a lot of friction. It takes effort to go ahead and move your balance from one employer's plan to another employer's plan. The default for so many people is to have that amount get cashed out. But I do think there could be something with education. And in fact, if we look at people's balances, let's just take, for example, somebody in their mid-20s who had like a $3,000 balance and said, you know what, I'm going to cash that amount out, $3,000. If I project that out, Jeff, with 5% interest, in retirement, that ends up being close to $23,000, or about 5% of that person's amount. And if that person takes a couple more of those cash outs, pretty soon we're looking at accounts that are almost like $100,000 in retirement, almost like 20% of what their projected retirement income could be. So, you know, Albert Einstein once said that compound interest, that's the eighth wonder of the world. And so I think there is some education about what does this mean if you take out what's seemingly a small amount now. What kind of impact would that have on your retirement balance? And a lot of times when you run the numbers, it's a pretty significant figure.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that, Rob. Spencer, I want to come back to you because we've had, because of the Pension Protection Act, auto enrollment, auto escalation, but now we're talking about auto portability, and this could really solve that leakage problem that both you and Rob outlined, or will solve that leakage problem because it's automated. What can you tell us about the auto portability solution?
Yeah, so the words I'd like folks to remember is recycling. Okay, it's essentially a recycling system. There's two key underpinnings to auto portability. One is deployment of technology that currently doesn't exist in the system today, and I'll talk about that in just a second. And the second is legal guidance. So, you know, in a minute, we're going to let Rob talk about the success and research behind some of the other autos. But the basic story is, from a legal perspective, if we can change the default from opt-in to opt-out, we see dramatic changes in participants' behavior. That's the legal principle behind, and the behavioral principle, frankly, behind auto portability. So today's system is that if someone wants to keep their savings, we were talking about this for the last couple of minutes, they have to take action, right?
Yep.
Well, let's flip that. Let's turn that around and say, if they want to retain their savings, they don't have to do a thing. All they have to do is fold their hands and sit quietly, and their savings will be retained. So that brings us to the second part, which is the technology. Again, this technology it exists, but it is not in use widespread today. And the technology it's actually very simple. It's not new technology. It's deploying known technologies to essentially connect what are disconnected systems in retirement, right? So think about a record keeper. Vanguard is a record keeper, and Fidelity is a record keeper. Most importantly, Alight is a record keeper, right?
I was wondering if you're going to get there.
You always save the best for last.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Thank you,
You know,
Spencer.
the reality is that the plans, the companies that Alight serves, there's no technological connection between those plans and the plans that Fidelity serves. Okay? This is why we use the term friction when we look at someone who says wants to move their money, because there's no way to do it other than forms and paper and checks and telephone calls and things like that. So we put technology in place so the person doesn't have to make a decision, and we have an agreement between Alight and Fidelity that on call, the money will be moved from a former employer plan to a new employer plan, frictionless. So that's the essence of auto portability. It's designed to retain small dollar savings in the system so they grow, like Rob talked about.
Well, I mean, to me, if you're a plan sponsor, you're someone who sponsors a retirement plan, this really seems like, I'm just giving you the former consultant's opinion, it seems like a layup. I mean, it seems like something you want to think about if someone's going to leave the plan. You don't want that you have uncashed checks. You may have stale data checks. I used to do that when I was a record keeper. Mm-hmm. All these things provide administrative challenges, and it just seems like this would really check the box, Spencer, from a fiduciary perspective as well.
Yeah, and think about missing participants as well. Right now, we perform searches on people who leave us with bad addresses. That's like a Band-Aid, and it works, and we do it. But let's cure it. Let's keep that individual's money consolidated in their account as they move from employer to employer. We'll cure missing participants.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I want to take a very quick break. When we come back, more with Spencer and Rob. We're going to be examining auto portability and some of the research when we come back. So stay tuned right here on BRN AM. Welcome back. I'm joined this morning by Spencer Williams of Retirement Clearinghouse and Rob Austin of Alight Solutions. Gentlemen, thanks so much for staying with us this morning.
Glad to be here, Jeff.
Rob, I want to come to you because I want to talk about the research we highlighted in segment 1 with auto portability and auto escalation and auto enrollment. What can you tell us about the successes of auto enrollment and auto escalation? Because by and large, it's been very successful in getting people in the plans. And now you have this next auto feature that could really translate and will translate to a lot of success.
Yeah, sure. So I think the one thing to take away is automatic features work. So let me just kind of give a little bit of prevalence. Let's kind of talk about some of the findings that we have through all of the research that we've done here at Alight. So we have a report, we call it our Trends in Experience and Defined Contribution Plans that we've done for several years. And what we found was with automatic enrollment, sort of in the wake of PPA, it was about 60% of employers had this. But over the last few years now, Jeff, it's almost 3/4 of employers, large employers particularly, have automatic enrollment. And I think some of it's because the dialogue has shifted from why should we add this to how can we justify not having it? And a lot of that justification comes down to the data that we see. Plans that have automatic enrollment have much higher participation rates than those that don't. And in fact, when we look at this, plans that have automatic enrollment have an average participation rate of 87%. Plans that don't have automatic enrollment, average participation rate 62%. That's a 25 percentage point gulf that's just due to automatic enrollment. So I think a lot of people are saying, does automatic enrollment work? Yes, absolutely. 25 percentage points higher from the average participation rate. So let's look now at automatic contribution escalation. Again, it's about 3/4 of employers have automatic contribution escalation. And I think here's a really good proof point to say, why does that work? If I look at 2020, and I even concentrate down in that first quarter of 2020, when Wall Street was crumbling and 401k account balances were just tumbling, we still saw almost 20% of people increase their contribution rate to the 401k. This is when people were pulling back on other expenditures, but they were increasing their 401k contributions. Why is that? When we pop the hood, it's because of automatic contribution escalation. So for sure, we know these auto features work, and I think the lesson that a lot of plan sponsors have is if there are automatic features that are going to improve people's accounts, by all means, let's go ahead and add them.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to come back to you. Let's talk a little bit more about the benefits. Thanks, Rob, for that. Talk the benefits about auto portability. And one of the things, Spencer, that we often talk about and have talked about is retirement income. We're talking about it now when it comes to the Secure Act. And of course, we've got the CARES Act and dealing with the pandemic and the market volatility. But when it comes to the Secure Act and generating retirement income, if you don't know where your balances are, and how do you factor that into what you need? So let's tick off some of the benefits here for those fiduciaries and participants, by the way, who are in plans and thinking about, hey, what do I do at distribution? What do I do with my money?
Great. So yeah, let's start with the prime fiduciary, who's the plan sponsor. And you say, so what's in it for them in terms of auto portability? Well, first of all, a higher bar is set when you talk about, hey, there's an ability, a capability in the market to retain these savings. But let's drill down into that, peel the cover off, as they say. One, they have a small account problem too, okay, plan sponsors. And when we talk to them, most of them don't like the fact that they distribute these accounts out to, an IRA, and they sort of get lost, orphaned, stranded, all of those words. But let's flip that around, because I think this is the dawning that is starting to happen. It's early days yet, Jeff, but think about all your new hires. Okay, so you're an employer. You just hired someone. The odds are pretty good they came from somewhere else, and the odds are very high that they had a 401k there. Now, wouldn't you want them to bring that money into your plan for multiple reasons, okay? One, average account balances. So you get a pricing advantage if you have more money in the plan. That's just how the system works. Two, financial wellness programs. How, as you were intimating a second ago, Jeff, how are you going to deliver a financial wellness program on somebody who just started contributing to your plan at $100 a week? Okay, it's crazy, right? But if they bring in their prior balance, all of a sudden the picture gets full. So I think from a fiduciary perspective, particularly when you think about the guardrails that the Department of Labor has put around auto portability to ensure consumer protections, it is kind of a no-brainer for a plan sponsor. Okay?
Absolutely. And so if I wanted to sign up for this, say I'm a fiduciary and I want to do this, what does it take to put you currently have the infrastructure in place with Alight, but what does it take to build the infrastructure, put the infrastructure in place, agreements, and get this up and running? What's the time frame to do that and whatnot?
Yeah, like everything in our industry, it takes a while. Okay, but think about it. I'm gonna do a throwback analogy for you, Jeff. Okay, throwback analogy was when the railroads first started getting built, right? So the first thing that had to happen is we had to lay tracks. That's the infrastructure that you're referring to. Now, here's the funny thing. Alight has 185 plan sponsors and 5 million participants. And I promise you that when we turn this on at Alight here come next spring, that there will be traffic across those rail lines just within Alight. Because you have to, it's not like Alight is actually the operative engine. It's all the clients. Those clients are actually where the participants are changing jobs. Okay, so then the importance of Alight is just beyond comprehension. They're like the stake in the ground, the central rail station, and from there we're able to build off additional spokes of rail lines. So when we connect to Vanguard or we connect to Fidelity, all of a sudden we get sort of geometric increase in traffic. So you get the main rail station, that's Alight. I congratulate them for having the courage and the insight, to adopt first, and from there it just gets better as you expand the network.
Yeah, well, it sounds like this is a very important strategy, one that fiduciaries need to certainly think about, record-keeping partners need to think about as well. Spencer, Rob, thank you again for making some time this morning to join us on the program. Really important discussion. I hope a lot of people were paying attention. And we look forward to having you both back on the program again very soon.
Thanks so much, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff. Have a good day.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN AM. Have a topic of interest or someone you think we should talk to? Drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the news in retirement, markets, technology, personal finance, so much more, check out our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. So until tomorrow, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.
Waiting here for you to take